Joining me right now is Tennessee Congressman, House Ways and Means Committee member David Kustoff. Congressman, thanks very much for being here. There's a lot here to investigate. Your reaction?
Maria, good morning. Well, I think Americans should be concerned because, look, Biden had these classified documents. He knew about it. They were classified at the highest level possible. And another thing that Americans should be concerned about is that discovery, or at least the announcement of it by the Bidens, was November 2nd, 1 week before the November 8th election. And so if that information, that those classified documents had been found and was announced to the American public before the November election, it very well could have had an effect on the election. So if you're the Department of Justice today and you've got the investigation into the documents that were obtained by President Trump versus then Vice President Biden, in some ways it's apples to apples. They're both classified documents. The differences are that President Trump had the ability to declassify documents that were in his possession. Biden, as the vice president or former vice president, did not have that authority to declassify.
Well, look, Congressman, with all due respect, this is hardly apples to apples in any way, shape, or form, okay? We continue to see communist China supporting this president and making this situation compromised, where the commander-in-chief is having to make decisions about China policy, when in fact he personally and his family has taken in all of this money. So the documents discovered right before the midterm elections, how much more should the public be taking of this? First, the DOJ and the FBI sit on Hunter Biden's laptop right before the elections, and there's a massive campaign to get the media to suppress truth and amplify lies by the FBI, with a staff of 80 agents earmarked specifically just to deal with the media. Now we find out that the University of Pennsylvania received millions of dollars to set up this PennBiden office, okay? So more money from communist China. And now, on top of all of that, we learn that there were classified documents in that office. And Joe Biden has this drama show, good enough for Hollywood, when Donald Trump is, when we learn that there were classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. And he has this incredible theatrics about how irresponsible it is. How much more are we supposed to take? You're an elected official. What are you doing about all of this?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when I talked about apples to apples, I meant in terms of the Justice Department. In my opinion, it's not fair to investigate President Trump and not Biden, or charge Trump and not Biden. So those are the differences, and those are the key things that the Department of Justice is going to have to weigh. But you've seen that concern from Jamie Comer, who is the chairman of the Oversight Committee, Jim Jordan, who is now the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and now this new committee that will investigate abuses by federal officials, possible abuses by the Department of Justice, and abuses by the FBI, where we can do a deep dive and look at all these discrepancies. To your point, the American people should be concerned of the disparate treatment between elected Republicans and elected Democrats. And I think that Jamie Comer and Jim Jordan and this Republican House of Representatives is going to do the appropriate deep dive and investigations into these issues.
So far, we've seen Kevin McCarthy keep his promises. The House is set to vote on Buddy Carter's new bill to abolish the IRS, the Fair Tax Act, getting rid of income tax, payroll tax, corporate taxes, gift taxes, and the death tax, and replacing them with a simplified consumption tax on goods and services. Congressman, what can you tell us about the reversing the 87,000 IRS agents, which Kevin McCarthy promised would be his #1 priority when he got in office, and all of this from Buddy Carter?
Well, first, as it relates to Congressman Carter's proposal, you know, I'm from Tennessee, which is one of 9 states without an income tax. And Tennessee also has a balanced budget provision. but Tennessee runs a budget surplus every year based on, in large part, that consumption tax, that sales tax. So it can work. It can work, and I think it's something. I appreciate Kevin McCarthy honoring that pledge to look into the elimination of the income tax and studying it. And I also appreciate Speaker McCarthy honoring, and he talked about this during the campaign, the very first pledge, and that was to reverse the funding and to staff those 87,000 new IRS agents. That was a big audit grab, Maria, for lower income and middle income Americans to fund all the provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act and all these Green New Deal initiatives that the Democrats had us vote on last year. I tell you that my constituents and the American people should be horrified with the possibility of 87,000 new IRS agents who would just be charged with conducting audits.
Yeah, well, and compare that to the amount of agents you've got at the border, and it's just stunning. He wants 166,000 IRS agents after that 87,000 versus 15,000 border agents at our southern border. Congressman, you've had a busy couple of days in the new 118th Congress. Thanks very much. We'll be watching you. Of course, the other side is giving you plenty of content to work with. David Kustoff, good to see you this morning, sir. Thank you.